This is Laura DeFranco, holistic physical therapist and owner of Brave Healer Productions. I'm excited to bring you my new holistic healing series where you're going to learn from the experts what it means to live fiercely alive, mind, body, and soul. I invite you now to take a breath, relax, and feel the vibe of the words my guest has to share with you today. Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, and I am happy you could join us for another bit of healing badassery today. The mission around here is to change the world one brave word at a time. And here to help me do that today is Kelly Inviere. Kelly is a poet, author, and artist living in the greater Washington, D.C. area with her wife and 2 cats. She uses her creativity as an outlet to find healing and catharsis, and shares her story with the world in hopes of offering the same to her readers. And Kelly, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited.
So you talk a lot about, aside from your amazing poetry, you like to talk and teach about loss and trauma. So tell us a little bit about what you want to help us with today, using creativity to heal and grow after we've had a trauma.
Absolutely. Honestly, for me, I, about coming up on 6 years ago, lost my father very suddenly. He was only 55 and he had an arrhythmia, which means that the heart just kind of doesn't continue beating the way it's supposed to. And so I had to, at 23, deal with complex grief. On top of having kind of a traumatic childhood, I needed to find something that gave me some sense of relief and some sense of being and meaning. And that's when I started telling my story through poems and poetry. And so instead of going into the panic, instead of going into what was hurting, I let it out onto the page. And I think it's just so important for people to understand that they have the ability to heal themselves, as I know that is sort of your mission. But one of the ways that you can do that is just by having a dialogue with yourself.
Wow, I think I'm a fan of therapeutic kinds of writing and narrative therapy and journaling to heal. And I heard you say the term complex grief, and that lit up a little light bulb for me, because a lot of people talk about grief, but that might be the first time I've heard that used together, complex. And it's really great for people to understand that there are forms of grief that are more complex than other, and for lots of reasons. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, no problem. So the difference between just grief and complex grief is that you lose someone, it's always going to be hard. You're never going to be ready. It's never going to feel like the right time. But when you already have other mental health that's going on, whether that's anxiety or depression or PTSD, often that turns into what's called complex grief. And that means that it just becomes this thing that feels insurmountable and endless. And it's really, really hard to be in the thick of it. I was actually going through panic attacks multiple times a day, and I was dealing with going to the ER for, physical symptoms to the panic attacks multiple times a month. And that was before finding, healing in both visual art, which is my original art form, and poetry, which is what I found later.
So you believe that it's possible to find beauty in what may feel broken, which is sometimes how we feel when we're having these forms of complex grief, and that sorrow and love are the 2 sides of the same coin, you say. So I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but let's hear one of your beautiful poems first. And then we're
Okay,
going to come back to that idea of finding beauty in the broken.
that sounds perfect. So this is actually the first poem in my book, Where the Light Shines Through, a memoir in poetry.
Oh,
This
cool. Are
is
you
called,
reading from your book today?
I have my book right here.
Oh, good, good, good.
I do find it
Show
a
it to
little,
us.
I do find it
Yay.
a little bit easier to read it from something else, but
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
you're welcome. So this is called My Story. This is my story. These are my words. Most have rarely been heard by those who inspired them. My fire within. This is my story. So turn the page if you dare, if you care to know who's really there. This is my story. No holding back, not an attack, but my truth. I write these words to soothe the pains from my youth and those from today, and to show I'm okay even when I'm not okay. This is my story. I write it from my heart. Even if the start comes from pain, there is no growth when there's no rain from up above. For what is pain if not love?
I'm going to give you a couple snaps for that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. I met you when you came to our open mic and spotlights event. What was that? I never know what day it is
Oh
anymore
goodness. Oh
this
yeah.
year.
What is time this year?
So thank you for coming to that. You guys, we've got another open mic and spotlights coming up October 23rd. It's a Friday evening, 7:30 Eastern. I'll drop the link in the comments for you for that if you guys want to join us. But I got to hear, I believe you did read that poem that night and some other ones, and they're just beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
You're so welcome.
So let's get back to finding the beauty in the brokenness, and the idea of sorrow and love being, I look at them as a yin yang,
Yeah,
talk to me about that a little
absolutely.
bit.
So I would say that in terms of finding sorrow and pain as something beautiful, there is always a silver lining to every cloud. And I truly believe that when we look at the painful things that shape us, it makes us a stronger, more empathetic, more loving person. And it helps us to want to reach out and help other people in the world. When you've been through something that's traumatic, or you've been through something that's hard or painful, you then have this empathy to listen better and to actually hear what other people are going through in a way that you maybe didn't before. And so I really like the analogy. There's a Japanese art, kintsukuroi, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's of mending ceramic objects by aggrandizing the breaks with gold. And I love this not just as an art form in itself, but as a philosophy, because they believe the piece is more beautiful for having been broken and been through a damaging experience. And I think that we as people are the same. Our hearts break and we fill the cracks with the golden light of joy and love and new experiences. And we're more beautiful for having been through that.
Mm. There's somebody I have to introduce you to. I would butcher that title as well for it's the name of the craft
Yeah.
of, yeah, it's that Kins something. Yeah.
And
She's gonna, yell at me for not being able to say it right.
there are two pronunciations, and I think I've probably gotten somewhere close to one of them.
Yeah, really, really beautiful way to look at life, actually. I think that people get stuck inside of their pain and they forget that what they've been through can help somebody else. And it's just about kind of flipping a little bit of a switch and turning this is how you be. It's like I ask myself the question, what am I made of? And it's the painful moments that made me who I am, and able to share and help others. So I love that topic. I think it's really important. Thank you for talking about that.
Absolutely.
So got another poem for us?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is called White Picket Fences. White picket fences, masks and defenses, only knowing what you see, yet turmoil grows within me deeply. Can you see me? Grass always greener on the other side, no place to run, no place to hide, beyond the barren family tree, hollow and withered, losing leaves. How I long for a reprieve, how I wish I could retrieve the comforts of a certainty. Was that ever my reality? Was that girl even me? Home is meant to bring me peace. What a tangled web we weave. White picket fences, masks and defenses. Feels like I'm on stage. The role that I must play becomes my own cage, wishing I could turn the page. It's not supposed to be this way. Why do I stay? What can I say? White picket fences can't keep me safe.
Mm. The role becomes the cage. You know how sometimes a line, grabs you and then you aren't listening to the rest of the poem, damn it. Like that one, that line, I had to write down that line. That was awesome. I so know what that is.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of us do. I think that a lot of us feel like we have this part that we're meant to play. I like the Shakespeare's analogy that the world is a stage and we're all merely players, and I definitely adhere to that. I think that there's no dress rehearsal to life, but it's definitely, we're in it and we're in our performance, and just perform the best you can.
Yeah, exactly. You can't fuck this up.
No.
I mean, you really can't. You got to do the best you can. And right now, in this crazy year of 2020 and everything that's going on, I think that we have to cut ourselves some slack.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, when you said earlier, I don't know what, time it is, what day it is. It's sort of like, yeah, that's very relatable for me. I'm kind of constantly in a state of flux.
So I know you also want to help others who've been through loss, abuse, mental health struggles, to know that they're not alone. So thank you for wanting to be part of that mission in the world. You said, I hoped that by opening up about these kinds of difficult topics with authenticity, that you could help the stigma around these things. And really they become uniting experiences. And I so am with you in terms of when you're sharing your words out loud, you're giving somebody else permission to tell their story as well, or just simply not feel alone. Talk to me about that.
So when I started this project of putting my book together, I started actually with a series of short stories. I realized at some point that growing up with what was not a healthy family dynamic, I had a lovely father who was wonderful, and I, really can only say wonderful things about him. But my mother has mental health issues, and so they had a pretty rough dynamic when I was growing up, and that helped to shape a lot of my own mental health issues. So I try to talk really openly about that, and the fact that childhood abuse happens, and it's not pretty, and it's not something we like to talk about, but it happens. And I am unfortunately not able to be in relationship with my mother, so I am not able to be in contact with either of my birth parents, and that feels like a great deal of loss by 29. And so again, it's just one of those things where I try to be really authentic about who I am and what I've been through, so that other people can kind of understand that they're not alone, and maybe they find themselves on one of the pages. Maybe it's about abuse, maybe it's about loss, but I definitely cover all of those topics in my poems in this collection, because I want people to be able to find a little something for themselves.
So tell us what the book is called again, please.
It is called Where the Light Shines Through, a memoir in poetry.
Thank you. And when did you write it?
So it's been a sort of labor of love for a few years now. I started shortly after my father passed away in 2014. And At that point, it was still in short story form, and it was kind of a mess. I was kind of a mess. I was definitely not together. And all of the dreams that I had for myself, all of the things I wanted, seemed unimportant during the grief that I was going through.
Mm.
But I also knew that I was my father's legacy, and I was worthy of wanting what I wanted for myself and fighting for that. And so I started to write poetry to help me to process what I was feeling. And so it came out this past June. So it's been a few years, but I really couldn't be more proud of it. I, poured my heart, my soul, my life into this, and there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in this memoir. But
Well, please share another poem.
okay, so this one delves into a little bit of the childhood traumas. It's called Past the Rebel. I look out at the battlefield of my polluted childhood, a warlike haze in which I stood. My gaze could not yield the flashes, your words still scintillate in my eyes, as ashes fall like heavy lies. I gave my all with great travail to hinder all your hate-filled words, but my efforts fell to your avail, and you raised my world to epic scale, taking life. The humming breeze, the singing birds, no longer are their stories heard. I look out to the western skies, the blood-soaked clouds in the bruised twilight as darkness spreads to inky black. I contemplate why I look back to this lethal world you think my only fundamental truth. Yes, maybe in my youth you held me, prisoner to your cacophony, but listen to the symphony I create. Each steady breath I take to revitalize, a warrior you would scrutinize and try to beat, but you were never my defeat. And so I turn round to the east and trudge on toward the rising sun. My life not over, but just begun.
Beautiful. I was in the sky with you on that one. And I am a corny fan of rhyming. I joke that a lot of my poems come out kind of to the tune of "'Twas the night before Christmas" and all through the house. I don't know, rhyming turns me on, and I love the way you pull rhyme through your poems. So yeah,
Thank you.
I can't get enough of that. So what do you think is the most important thing for our viewers to understand about their own self-care and this healing journey that we're all on right now?
Honestly, I think that the one thing, if you take anything away from this podcast, you deserve to take care of yourself. You deserve to feel loved. You deserve to feel respected. You deserve to feel completely and totally accepted by yourself and by anyone in your life. And if you don't, then I encourage you to look inward. I encourage you to explore what blocks you may have for yourself. And then I encourage you to look at the people in your life and find out whether or not those are people who are being good to you, kind to you. And if that's not the case, then sometimes goodbye is the kindest word.
We were having this discussion in a group of healers the other day, and it came up about friends are sort of one level of this. And we were talking about being able to do the weeding that we needed so that we could feel good again. But then somebody brought up family and how that was so much harder to do this because of the duty and obligation we feel. Will stick around and be abused or be treated poorly because it's family. What do you have to say about that?
I agree 100%. I spent 28 years trying to form a relationship with someone who was not capable of being in any sort of a healthy relationship with me. And I tried so hard to, you know, find something of maternal love from someone who didn't have it. And I like to say you can't get a drink from a dry well. You know, you can continue to pull that bucket up as many times as you want, but it's just going to be really heavy and then full of sand. And so in the end, I think that it's about putting yourself first and knowing that it's okay sometimes to put yourself first. It's okay to love yourself enough to know that blood isn't always thicker than water. We can form our own families of choice, and sometimes that tie just isn't meant to be there. And it's okay to cut those people who are a toxic part of your life loose. And when someone has hurt you and abused you, and or even just been that negative person in your life who is just constantly trying to bring you down, sometimes letting go of those people can be the most loving, kind act you can give yourself.
Amen to that. So do you have a couple more poems?
I do.
Okay, let's do a poem.
Okay. So this is called Side by Side. I awoke in front of me, like mirror image I could see all of who I've come to be. I saw my hands both outreached. In the left, my history, what was left, my regrets, sorrows of losing love, losing health, losing self, all that was not meant to be, a load so heavy, yet my hands still steady. I shift my glance down to my right and see the outcome of the fight I'd seen before. Not a fight I could ignore, forging me to something more. Someone who stayed, someone brave, someone with pathways paved, someone with direction. I see the connection, my left hand and my right. I understand the strand of light, my past, a present, to present my past. I gift it back to me with a note read opportunity. So I wrote it out to see how creativity can heal and how duality can feel when joy comes from sorrow and creates bittersweet, nostalgic tomorrows. Still feeling complete, they do not compete. They borrow from each other where the timeline meets to create me. I awoke and I could see my hands outreached. When I looked down, no one around, I softly cry. Still not sure why, when joy and sorrow reside side by side.
We were talking about that idea of these things being, one can't exist without the other. You're making me think of a quote too by Brene Brown. If you numb the pain, you also numb the joy. And so it's really good. You know, we're meant to be able to feel everything and both ends of that spectrum. What turns you on the most about what you're doing with this poetry these days?
Oh God, you know, honestly for me, I would say that on a personal level, being able to look over everything that I have put out on paper and being able to hold that in my hands and see my story and see it validated for myself, by myself, is one of the most powerful and empowering experiences I've ever had. So if you haven't ever picked up a pen to write down your own story, I highly recommend just pick up a pen and just start writing. It doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be poetry, it doesn't have to be anything but your own truth. And then on the note of how it helps the world, I hope that, you know, this helps one person is kind of my thought process. Was if this book reaches somebody and it helps them, if this book touches someone when I'm talking about the deal with, you know, complex grief, or when I'm talking about the issues of suicide or self-harm, or talking about, you know, just having to sever ties with those toxic people, I hope that people are able to see a little bit of themselves in that book. And if it can just reach even one person, then I think I've done my job.
So where can they get the book?
Well, it is available on Amazon. It is also available on most major book-selling websites. So Books A Million, Barnes and Noble,
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. I will link you all up in the show notes. Don't worry. I will have it there for you guys to find. Okay, one last question I love to ask my guests, and then we're going to close out with your last poem, okay?
Okay.
What do you love to do aside from poetry so much that you lose track of time?
I absolutely adore painting.
Yes.
A lot of my creativity started actually because of my father and I working together on painting projects. And I went to art school at the Corcoran in DC. And before it was bought out, but it was a really great experience for me. I adore painting. It is so freeing to be able to maneuver the paint colors around the page. And I see it as a very similar art form to poetry in a way.
Yeah, meditative.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
All right, Kelly, close us out with your last poem.
All right, and this is actually really perfect. This is the last poem in the book as well. It's called At First Flight. Wrapped in the safety of my cocoon, the pieces of my heart renewed as I reviewed who I wanted to be. I reviewed each piece of me, searching for what was left behind in the shattered fragments of my mind. I didn't mind. Being shattered was just fine. But fine was far from whole. Piecing me together took its toll, so I stayed in the cocoon I'd built, soft and warm, hidden from what life had dealt me. But there was more that I could be. I saw a piece called creativity. I saw another labeled voice. So I made my choice and I broke through, exhausted, weighed down, yet finally true. I sought to reach and touch the sky. With my new wings, I tried to fly. The air surrounded, lifting me, floating gently, finally free, the me I always thought I'd be. But then I looked down to see I was grounded, surrounded by the world I knew. I was living for me and you, learning how to fly in time, but taking time forgiving me, forgiving you, forgiving into grief. Imagine my relief to see my drying wings, the image that I could be more than something misunderstood. I could be me, and that was how it should be. Now I see my wings are dry, ready to take a leap and fly, ready to explore the sky, ready to know, no more asking why I had to break to fly. This was always choice. This is my truest voice. This is my time to rejoice. I'm finally me and I am whole. There's so much more to behold. There's so much more in a goodbye. There's so much more when I choose to fly and bring us closer, you and I. I try not to see the end, but a cycle we are in. And now I see your face again. Now I hear your words, my friend. Flying higher now, let's begin. This is your legacy, not your end. I am you. I am me. I am ready to ascend.
Oh, there was a very lovely sense of freedom all throughout that poem. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
Listen, thank you really so much for the poetry today, for what you're doing in the world, and for being here today to share it with everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This is a wonderful platform, and I love the work that you're doing, helping to empower people to use their voices to be brave and to heal.
Thank you. Viewers, don't forget to go down, scroll down just a little bit after the show into those show notes. We're going to link you up with the book link, and where can they find you other than that?
So my Instagram handle would be at Kelly in Vier. That's where I post a lot of things.
Cool. I will link you guys up.
I also do an open mic on Instagram on at CM Love Poet.
Perfect.
And then I have a Facebook poetry page, which is facebook.com/Kelly and Vera Poetry.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, you guys, you heard it. Go find Kelly, explore her book, grab a copy, and really just dive into the good vibes, you guys. I love bringing poets on the show, and this series is just turning me on, every guest that we have. And don't forget, if you're a poet or even an author and you're feeling like doing a little open mic magic with us, Open Mic and Spotlights is October 23rd, Friday night, 7:30 to 9:30. And I'll give you some information in the show notes about coming. You can come to read, or you can come to just chill and listen too. Either way is good. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Lastly, I just want to leave you with this one message. Your words will change the world when you're brave enough to share them. Be brave, everybody. Until next time, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.